Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. We'll be continuing today with our exploration of Franz Barden's initiation into Hermetics, step 10. So towards the end of this last chapter of the book, we have an exploration of a number of different, we could say like magical processes or skill sets or ways of using a lot of the qualities and skills we've developed up to this point. So we'll go through a few of those. The first is a brief exploration of symbology, and this is in direct relation to the Indian system of Brahma and Shakti. And so this looks at the root chakra and looks at the symbology of that, which is a square typically with a triangle. The square is typically a yellowish type of color, a red type of triangle, a phallus, and a serpent. Now there's many variations to this, depending on the system and how they like to work that. But the point when we look at stuff from a symbological standpoint, if that's a word, is that we can start to unpack information and we can start to see how a whole system of training and initiation can begin to arise through the symbology. So the square can be seen as representative of the earth element in isolation. Right, the cube. If we look at from a more of a sacred geometry standpoint, the cube is to the earth element, right, to the form. Now, the square has four corners, right, to the four elements. The earth element is composite of earth, water, air, and fire. Right, so as all the elements come together and solidify, we get the earth element. Okay, now the yellow can be gradations of that, sandy, etc. And this starts to lead into some of the Kabbalistic colorings that have to do with the earth element and the Akashic nature of the earth. Some really interesting stuff in there. Of course, the triangle would be to the three worlds. Right, material, astral, mental, just as the trident is to the three worlds, material, astral, mental. And this is, when you look at that, within the, if it's placed within the square, you have the mastery of the elements in the material and the vital, right, in the astral and in the mental. Right, the full scope of that. Then you would have in this case, the phallus or the creative spark, that very yang creative spark, right? The spark of transformation, right? The heat of transformation. Transformation is typically offsets heat in different ways, right? And then, of course, you have the serpent. And the serpent, it's representative everywhere. You see even like the wand of Hermes. You see the singular version where you have a staff with a serpent coiling around it, a tree with a serpent coiling around it, right? In this case, the serpent is to, and is almost always to, wisdom. We might say the cooling factor or quality of wisdom. Right, so the heat of the creative spark, this transformational creative spark of, in some sense, the imaginative, not in terms of imagination, but the creative faculty itself, right? That heat, that creative evolution is tempered by the cooling waters, we might say, or yin quality of wisdom, right, of discernment and wisdom, which is very interesting. The snakes, of course, cold-blooded. So there's a lot you can explore here. So that's the first little portion of this section, is a brief exploration of symbology. Now, symbology, this is something that you can dive into, and the mysteries that start unveiling themselves to you can be quite profound. So there can be a lot of value in exploring symbology, because when you're in deep practice, often you'll get reflections, different symbols, different mandalas, all types of different things will start to pass through, you'll become aware of. And not that we need to attach to these, but it can be quite interesting to make a little mental note, let it go, and later on do some research. And if you start to notice in your practice that you're regularly getting certain symbology, certain symbols are presenting themselves, or series of symbols, this leads the way to an intuitive type of growth and an intuitive relationship to potential rituals you might engage in, and this just keeps cascading as these symbols flow through, and it's quite a fascinating aspect of the training. Okay, so that's the first one of these here. There's a bunch, so we'll see how many we get through. We might work this through a couple of episodes here. The next is suggestion. Now, the next few I don't want to go into too much depth with. He doesn't here either. The reason for this is that this is where you start using these skills in relation to the environment. So this can be with other people, and in the spaces you inhabit, etc. Now, remember, this is step 10. There is a hell of a lot of maturity and practice that has gone in to the practitioner prior to this, right? There's a lot of development that has occurred. And in traditional systems, before you would even begin to approach this kind of stuff, you would have spent years cultivating deep humility, years cultivating a type of devotion to the highest ideals along the path, and teachers and lineage, if you're that sort of mentality, through and beyond deity, etc. Years purifying your mind and mental attributes, your astral attributes, right? Your physical attributes. Years exploring that purification, right? Years exploring what it means to give, to offer beyond your small-minded self. But there's some deep, profound work that takes place, right? And one of the biggest, we might say, negative aspects, especially of the Bardonian approach, or this type of Hermetic approach, is that we will often start to engage in enacting, working with the environment, working on people, well before we've cultivated a true goodwill, right? And really developed and surrendered all these weird aspects of ourselves. It's part of the path, is this transformation and evolution. So suggestion is essentially the auto-suggestion that you do for yourself. Through your development, you'll know yourself so well that you begin to know others, and you are able to offer suggestion in a way that it is impactful towards others. Okay? Telepathy is typically seen, this is the next one, telepathy as the reading of thoughts, right? And of course, anywhere there is a stimulus in, you can also enact a stimulus out, so you can send thoughts. And this is then discussed a little more in a later one of these little sections. But once you get to know yourself more and more and more, and this is the way that I like to explore this with students, so that you are cultivating your ethics, your goodness as a human, and these skills start to reverberate through you as a byproduct of your understanding of yourself, your exploration of your own evolution, of your connection to the world, to the environment, to people, through your goodwill, all of these types of things. And as a result of all of this deep exploration of emptiness, sacredness, you start to understand yourself very well. You start to know your physical body very, very well. You get to know your astral tendencies very, very well. You get to know your mental landscape very, very well. And of course, your causal and akashic framework and reference as that essence. Now, because of this, when mental stimulus enters that is not yours, you can start to pull that apart. That is sort of where a lot of, we might say, telepathy begins, is through telepathy, and in more of a feeling standpoint. That emotion, maybe that's not mine. Now, the only way to get a feel for this is to really know yourself so well that it is very clear when there's a type of energetic reaction, mental reaction occurring that isn't yours. And this leads into what we might call an introduction to psychic self-defense. And this happens when you start to spend time with people who have some skill, when there is psychic influence. So when someone is attempting to influence you, you can recognize where that might be in contrast to your natural mental state, your natural astral tendencies. So, basic things like using FOMO to get people to buy stuff, or whatever, you can start to feel when you're being influenced. And then you can start to course correct through your balancing of the elements, surrender, release. And ultimately, the easiest way is through tapping back into your own essence. Right, your own akasha. Now, that emptiness is a really good point to, departure point or reference point for us, right? So the better you get to know yourself, the better you get to understand how the fabrications of mind present themselves, and then you can simply watch as these come through. Now, in terms of actually reading a person, these skills, these develop very naturally because you know yourself so well. So where they tend to present themselves in the most intense way is within the work itself. If I'm teaching a workshop, for example, or working with students one-on-one, this is where the information really starts to cross over. And then you start to decide, how much do you want to unpack that? Is it necessary to unpack it? And sometimes this has to be done in the absence of any judgment. And through this empathic and telepathic type of connection, you really get to enrich. Your life becomes enriched. Your feeling quality becomes enriched. Your psychology becomes enriched. Your relationship to the world becomes enriched because you get to perceive what it is to live through the lens, so many different lenses of the different individuals you meet. And the prerequisite work of surrendering yourself and of not identifying yourself with habits of mind, habits of emotion, etc., and really embodying the space from the causal plane and understanding that this allows you to engage with all of this stuff without taking it on as your own identity, and then essentially you can take on illness and pathology and all kinds of weird stuff. Also, of course, the positives. We want to view this from the standpoint of emptiness, so then we can observe the enrichment and, of course, have this all just flow through from that standpoint of essence. Okay, so that is a little bit about telepathy. Of course, you can trade. Oh, got some shivers. Ooh, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it has something to do with the nails, and like, if you think of biting, like cotton balls. I don't know, that kind of thing. If you want to develop these skills specifically, of course, there's ways to do that. However, it can create types of imbalance. So we don't want to pursue specific skill in the absence of, or at the behest of, in the absence of equanimity. So that is the standpoint that I like to explore this stuff from. And very often through the training, people start to get telepathic experience, or they start to get clairvoyant experience and all these other experiences. We just have to make sure that we're not attaching to them, because this will slow down and can totally disrupt, in some cases, the actual spiritual development. Okay? So the next one is hypnosis. And this is through... He's relating it to like sort of the passing out, the conscious disappearance, so you influence the subconscious directly. Now, influencing the subconscious mind directly, this is a really big part of deep work. Any deep transmission is sort of, it's reflecting through the mental. We've got a deer walking by the window here. It's reflecting through the astral, it's reflecting through the physical. And of course, all this stuff is working at levels that is so far beyond our conscious comprehension. If we're doing really deep work, that it is very much influencing things from a subconscious standpoint. Now, from the perspective of hypnosis, this isn't really necessarily what we're doing. You can orchestrate this from that standpoint, but we don't want to be alleviating somebody's sovereignty. And this is like a really fine point that needs to be touched on, is this isn't, you could use this as a means of overriding somebody's will and overriding somebody's freedom, but that is in direct contrast to their spiritual growth, right? Sovereignty is absolutely key. And there is the argument to be made that you have to defabricate the congealing nature of the identity. You have to pull that apart, right? And when that is done, especially in really deep ways, it can almost be impossible to like stay awake. People just, right? The head starts nodding. It can be very difficult to retain conscious awareness, because the space we are inhabiting or sharing with people in this case is it's a very, very deep place that is most often related to deep states of sleep, right? We are working deeper and deeper and deeper into deeper layers of stillness, and emptiness, and cosmic connection. And typically, when the mind is in those deep states, the body is asleep. So we need to work this from a point of only good, where you really are offering people that sovereignty, that freedom into a greater union with reality and with essence and emptiness, right? With light, etc. So the coarse layer of hypnosis is not really what we're working with, though the effects can be of such a nature. And this is because you're taking people into deep meditative states. Now, if you're working this from the standpoint of the lower identity, the likelihood is you're going to be doing a lot more harm than good, right? So this is something that you need to figure out and This is why the cultivation of the actual spiritual development is so important. You can learn energetic skills, absolutely, but if you are expressing them from your normal self, or the absence of an evolved deep place of work, then what's going on out here? Just wanted to see a deer got spooked, and I just wanted to see if it was a bear or something. So anyway, when you are evolving through the spiritual path, there isn't so much of the negatives that can come through. What happens when the deep aspects of the personality haven't been really worked through is that in the course of transmission, you sort of just pick up that person's weird stuff, right? So if you're going to train with people, you want to do your best to really feel into the efficacy, the evolution of that person, right? The goodwill, the intentions, the volition behind the teaching. If there's any sense that that person is teaching for their own self-aggrandizement, their own sense of ego, look at this thing that I can do, look how strong I am, and look, blah, 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 then, for me at least, I stay away from those types of people, because while there might be certain things that can help evolve in you, ultimately, you have to end up unwinding whatever was put into place, because those barriers, it ends up creating barriers that you have to release on later, right? So hypnosis, it is a thing, but you want to be really cognizant of the ethics of people who use such things. I don't actively use any hypnosis. Some people find great value in it, but I like to work from the standpoint of the spiritual work that can have some automatic effects when it comes to working through the lower planes of the mental, astral, and physical. So the next one is mass hypnosis, and there are there's so many ways to look at that. From the standpoint of a show, if you've been doing something for a long time in the same place, or you are, in this sense, he's talking about some of the more like spiritual trick shows. If a ritual has been done for a long time through a family, you can really build up a lot, like in the Akasha, of strong relationship to that ritual, to the effects, and basically to the point where the people doing the ritual might not have any much personal development or connection to the energies, but through the, generation after generation, continuation of these rituals, the power builds up. And so through that, you might have whole theaters or whatever that are saturated with the Akasha. People walk in and bang, they're in a state and the show can take place. Now, from the standpoint of, say, controlling societies in vast amounts of people, this is again something that you want to look at. Especially in relation to your own sovereignty. What is it how do you what would it require for you in yourself to think a certain thing, to feel a certain thing, to act in a certain way, and how might you be convinced of that? If we can start really getting to know ourselves, we can have equanimity in the face of we might say like societal impositions, cultural imposition, when you are being told to think a certain thing, to feel a certain way, to act in a certain way. And in the presence of your own connection with emptiness, right? With your essence, in the presence of your own equanimity of mind, equanimity of emotions, equanimity within the body, you can start to really perceive when the turbulence is coming in and when there is a group consciousness that is starting to arise that is not yours. Once again, sovereignty, absolutely crucial to your unification with higher existence, right? You need to have that sovereignty. You cannot be in connection with your essence and easily manipulatable at the same time. You can be open to energy and stuff passing through, absolutely. And be manipulatable. But we want to always be cultivating our sovereignty, right? This is of absolute importance. And any very, very good teacher gives you sovereignty and encouragement, does not confine you to boxes, barriers, because higher level teaching is a very tricky thing, because your prerogative is to free somebody. It's in pretty stark contrast to freeing somebody to help them on their liberative journey when you put them in a box and say, this is your box of freedom. It only exists in this box. There's a little bit of contrast there, okay? So the next one, we have thought reading or mind reading. Once again, this is irrelevant of distance, and this can be done as you develop more and more. The same way that, for example, if I'm teaching overseas, like from online overseas, the way that you work a transmission overseas and the way that you do that and really bring someone into the space is through these connections, essentially through the Akasha. Now, as your practice develops, you'll be able to really start to tangibly perceive when this connection takes place. And through that, you can then have deep impact down the layers once again, but you connect up from that higher point. Now, we've discussed essentially thought reading, mind reading, etc. when we discussed telepathy. So, listen to that again. The important factors, of course, there's the listening aspect and there's the speaking aspect. If someone is of relatively equal skill, then it can be pretty clear that it's arising as a separate thing that's coming in. And of course, from a suggestive standpoint, sometimes you might have a thought arise of your own accord. If someone's very skilled, they can influence a thought to arise as if it's your own. What easier way is there for someone to want to do a thing than for someone to think that it is their idea? However, we want to work this not from the standpoint of manipulation. This is not what that's for. Be a good person, right? Step back, right? And for all this stuff, I don't suggest people attempt to work with this type of stuff in any way, outside of, working with friends who might be training partners who you have a very good will towards already with their knowledge, right? Working with their knowledge as well, so that you can build up some semblance of what this skill set is. But in terms of how it presents later on, if we let that develop, as we are dissolving through this spiritual development, then when you do work with this stuff, it is not you working with this stuff, it is streaming through you from the place of your absolute highest connection and dissolution, far beyond any individual ego, etc. So that's a really important aspect here. All right, I think the last one for today will be psychometry, which is essentially reading the memory of objects, right? Which is a weird one, but we've all are reading the memory of place, right? So an example would be like we've all been to places that are sacred, where you walk into, whether it's a temple or a particular environment in nature, where you're like, whoa, you just get hit. Whoa, this is, there's a silence, right? There's an emptiness, there's a power, there's something quite profound about it. And over time, you can start to feel in to more specifics. You might be able to receive from a clairvoyant standpoint, a clairaudient standpoint, a clairsentient standpoint, clairaudient and Augustinian standpoint, different memories of that place. You might smell incense that may have been burned in that place centuries ago, right? You might pick up rituals. You might hear chanting or song or prayer. Some very interesting things occur. So when you pick up an object of somebody's, you can start to read through that person by reading into the object. This is one thing. Or you might read environmental occurrences that took place in relation to that object. Maybe it's an old like samurai sword, right? A katana or something that was used in warfare, and you can touch that and you can, through the akasha, you get brought into that. You can start to see, the circumstance in which such things were used. When I was in Albania, I went to a castle that they took me to the torture area from years ago, the dungeons. And man, you walk into those dungeons, like it hits you heavy, right? You can feel the pain, the helplessness, the hopelessness. Is brutal. So through psychometry, you can start to tap into memory of object, memory of place. Now, there's exercises that can be done to start enhancing this that you can do with partners, and that can be really, really interesting. The specifics of how to train this, that's something that we do in person more. But we want to be aware of the potentials, right? Because sometimes we can be very casual in how we discard of things and stuff that's very personal to us. If we are relinquishing those objects, like a spring cleaning or whatever, it can be nice to recognize our connection to objects and the connection that we've imbued into objects through using them or whatever, and create a type of ritual or ceremony that is part of the letting go process, so that there can be a purification and a severing and a release of that information and that energy, right? And this can be a really nice way to make sacred your cleansing process in a spring cleaning type of fashion, right? So anyway, that is psychometry. There are a few more things that are mentioned here, so it's too much to get into today, so we'll continue this in our next episode. We're really getting close to the end of this book here. I haven't decided if I'm going to continue on with the evocation and Kabbalah in terms of this walkthrough series. I don't want to pigeonhole myself too much into just the Bardonian approach, and there's plenty of other things that we can discuss. I don't know if you guys like these solo chats more, or the interviews. It certainly takes a lot less organizing to chat by myself. So we'll see. We'll keep doing a mix. We'll get some more interviews in, and maybe we'll go through some books from some other systems, some texts from some other systems, and look through them from the perspective of, deep practice and what you can, ways you can begin to draw more and more meaning from those texts. Okay, so that's it for today. If you're interested in training, I have a retreat coming up here in June 2025. This is in British Columbia, Canada. This is a spiritual intensive retreat, 16 days. You can check out more information on the website. The cutoff date for registration is coming right up, so be sure to take a look at that. If you're interested in training online, we have courses in Tai Chi and Qi Gong, Hermetic, Alchemy, meditation, and of course there's a video Q&A reference library that's part of that, so any questions you have, I upload video answers for you there. Whenever I have service, because often I like to disappear into places where there is not service, because it's so much more fun to practice when I cannot check emails. Lastly, if you're interested in private lessons, I offer those online. These are 2 hours in length, and we go through some deep meditation and practice together in that format as well. All right, thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you on the next one. Practice. Bye.